Norway is one of the world's most spectacular cruise destinations. Why? Because it looks like this. Norway's coastline is so jagged with fjords that when you add it all up, it's actually longer than the entire coastline of the United States. There's deep blue fjords carved by glaciers, historic cities, and Arctic landscapes alive with the midnight sun and, sometimes, the northern lights. Norway has a little bit of everything. It's a country made for cruising, and every year hundreds of thousands of people do just that. By the way, my name is David Nikel. I'm a travel writer and a cruise ship speaker, specialising in all things Northern Europe. But my home base is here in Norway. In fact, I've lived here for 14 years now, and there's nothing I love more than talking about my adopted home country on cruise ships. I know the questions people ask, the surprises they often encounter, and the common mistakes they make. So I've poured everything I've learned in this time into this video, a complete guide to cruising in Norway. If you do enjoy this video, please consider joining my newsletter, The British Cruise Traveller, for insider advice and behind the scenes insights. Just head on over to davidnikel.com or click the link down in the description. So whether you're planning your first fjords sailing, considering a Northern Lights voyage, or just curious about what cruising here is really like, let's dive in. Let's start with why Norway is so good as a cruise destination. Well, Norway's geography does half the work for you with its epic coastline and fjords. Roads don't always get you to where you want to go, but ships can. From the deck of a cruise ship, you'll see cliffs plunge into the sea, waterfalls tumble down mountain walls, and fishing villages tucked into bays so narrow you wonder how a ship could even get inside. Unlike many destinations where cruises are about hopping between cities as quickly as possible, in Norway the sailing itself is the real highlight. Every day brings new scenery. Now, when people talk about a Norway cruise, they mean different things. So let's break down the main types, because your itinerary really matters to the experience you're going to have. For most first-time visitors, the fjords are the big draw. These deep blue waterways carved by glaciers are what make Norway world famous. And they're perfect for cruises because ships can take you right into the heart of the country. Just look how far inland the port of Skjolden is. Fjords cruises are also pretty much the easiest to book because almost every major line has them on the schedule. Royal Caribbean, P&O Cruises, MSC, Norwegian, Holland America, Viking, they all come here in the summer months. Itineraries are often 7 nights, sometimes 10, and common departure ports include Southampton, Hamburg, and Amsterdam. These itineraries mix coastal cities like Bergen, Stavanger, or Ålesund with classic fjord highlights such as Geiranger or Flåm. But this is important to understand. Not all Norwegian fjords cruises are the same. Far from it. On some big ship itineraries, you might only sail up one fjord. On others, you'll experience many more. For example, on a recent 7-night Fred Olsen trip from Rosyth near Edinburgh, we sailed along 3 of Norway's most famous fjords. And that makes for a very different experience, packed with scenic cruising. So before you book a fjords cruise, check how much time your ship will actually spend cruising the fjords versus visiting coastal towns. Now, it's not a deal breaker, it's just something to be aware of so you can set your expectations. The next type of Norway cruise I'm going to tell you about goes much further north. In the height of summer, you can sail all the way up the coast to the Arctic, where the sun doesn't set for weeks at a time. These itineraries are all about that unique midnight sun experience, the landscapes, the history, and bucket list destinations like Tromsø, the North Cape, and some itineraries even go all the way to Svalbard. Because of the distance, these voyages are going to be longer, often 10 nights, maybe even 14 or more. German cruise ships are especially common on this route, but you'll also find international lines offering sailings. If you've already done the fjords and you want to experience Norway on a deeper level, this kind of itinerary is a great choice. Now, the autumn and winter seasons have become much more popular in recent years for cruising in Norway, and that's really for one reason alone: the Northern Lights. Ships sail north of the Arctic Circle, giving you multiple nights of aurora hunting, far from light pollution. Many lines will make announcements so you don't miss the show if it appears while you're tucked up in your cabin. Of course, aurora can never be guaranteed, but here's the thing, these itineraries are about so much more than just seeing the Northern Lights. Ports of call often include Tromsø, Alta, and Narvik, where you can go dog sledding, snowmobiling, or meet Sami reindeer herders by day, and then chase the aurora at night. It's a memorable voyage, even if you're unlucky and the lights don't come out to play. Finally, there's Norway's most famous sea journey, the coastal route or the Coastal Express. Since 1893, scheduled ferries have been serving the Norwegian coastline, which for many decades now has run from Bergen all the way up to Kirkenes near the Russian border. Over the years, many different companies have served the route, and today there are two choices, Hurtigruten and Havila Voyages. But this isn't a cruise in a traditional sense. Really, it's a cruise-like experience on a local ferry. There are no casinos, no Broadway shows, and no formal gala nights. Instead, it's part working ship, part cultural experience, one where the scenery is your entertainment. You'll see the Lofoten Islands glowing under the midnight sun, the ship squeezing into the narrow Trollfjord, or you'll watch locals load and unload cargo at tiny harbours. The choice is yours. You can sail the full 11-night round trip, and many international visitors do. You could do a one-way trip or a shorter segment of the journey, for example, Bergen to Trondheim. These vessels run all year, giving you the choice of summer's endless daylight or winter's northern lights and snowy landscapes. Now, whichever type of Norway cruise you pick, let's talk about some of the ports you'll more than likely visit. Norway's capital city, Oslo, is home to the Opera House, the new Munch Museum, the National Museum, and the historic Akershus Fortress. It's compact and walkable once you get into the centre. Despite being the capital city and the biggest city of Norway, Oslo isn't typically included on fjords itineraries. More often than not, it's included on Baltic Sea and Scandinavian itineraries. Kristiansand is a sunny southern city known for its beaches, a modern art museum housed in this former grain silo, white painted old wooden townhouses, and the nearby zoo and amusement park Dyreparken. Stavanger is Norway's energy capital and gateway to Preikestolen, the famous pulpit rock, which overlooks the Lysefjord. The city itself offers a delightful old town right next to the cruise port. Bergen, Norway's second biggest city, is best known for its colourful Bryggen Wharf, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the views from the top of the Flybanen funicular railway. As well as being a popular cruise port in its own right, Bergen is the starting point for the Hurtigruten and Havila coastal voyages. Ålesund is a unique city rebuilt with strong Art Nouveau influences after a fire in 1904 destroyed the old wooden city. Surrounded by water and mountains, it's one of Norway's most picturesque coastal locations. Now let's head into the fjords, where we find Flåm. This tiny village at the end of the Ålandsfjord is most famous for the Flåm Railway, climbing up to Myrdal. Geiranger is the village at the end of perhaps Norway's most iconic fjord, the Geirangerfjord. This is Norwegian nature at its absolute best. Increasingly popular as a cruise destination, Olden offers easy access to the Briksdal Glacier and the Lån Skylift, which gives visitors these sensational views of the Nordfjord. In the north, Tromsø is Norway's Arctic capital and a year-round cruise destination. Summer hiking is a big attraction, while in the winter, fjord views by day and northern lights by night keep the visitors coming back in great numbers. Honningsvåg is known as the gateway to the North Cape, which marks the northernmost point in mainland Europe, sort of. Visiting here under the midnight sun is popular, but trips are also available in the winter when weather permits. Now, I know you all have many questions about Norway cruises. That's probably why you're watching this video in the first place. So I did a totally unscientific survey of a lot of the cruising Facebook groups to source the most common questions. which I'm going to answer now. Which cruise line or cruise ship should I pick? Well, there is so much choice here because pretty much every mainstream cruise line comes to Norway, or at least the Norwegian fjords in that summer season. What matters more is the type of ship you choose and the itinerary, as I said earlier. Now, if you really want to enjoy the scenery, I would argue that smaller, older, more traditional ships are the best choice. Why? Well, they can get further up the fjords and usually have more outdoor deck space just due to design, which is exactly what you want in Norway. That said, some of the world's biggest ships also come to the Norwegian fjords, and if that's your preference, just make sure you pick one with a decent amount of outdoor space. If you're on a larger ship, a balcony cabin is really worth considering. You'll really appreciate the privacy when early in the morning all you want to do is sit with a cup of coffee and admire the sail-ins to these tiny fjord towns. Now, I say this as a fully paid up member of Team Inside Cabin, but Norway is one of those places where I'm always tempted to stump up for a balcony cabin. What should I pack for a Norway cruise? Well, the golden rule is to expect all 4 seasons in a single day. This was always told to me when I grew up in England, but in Norway, it's really true. Even in July, you might wake up to sunshine, experience rain by lunchtime, have sunshine again in the late afternoon, but then need to go running to grab a fleece. Layers are the key. Start with a breathable base layer, then add mid-layers as you need them, whether they're thin t-shirts or warmer, thicker jumpers, and then make sure you have a waterproof and windproof outside layer, preferably full body, windproof and waterproof. It's really important no matter what time of year you visit Norway. Good walking shoes are essential, especially for excursions. Many towns have cobbled streets, and trails around the fjords can be muddy. Now, don't forget sunglasses and sunscreen either. And no, I'm not joking. Even in the winter, because the glare from the snow can be dazzling. Do I need to worry about seasickness? Well, Norway's coastline is in many places sheltered, and especially when you're sailing inside the fjords, but this doesn't mean the sea is always going to be calm. Most big cruise ships sail out to sea between ports, and of course, the North Sea crossing at the start and end of your trip can sometimes be choppy. Even along the coastal route, there are stretches of open water, like between Bergen and Ålesund, or around the north of the country. The funny thing is, there's no real way to predict it too far in advance. I've had really rough sea in July, and I've crossed the North Sea in midwinter, and it's been glass-like. If you're prone to motion sickness, definitely bring remedies that work for you. The good news is that within the fjords themselves, calm waters are the norm. Is a Norway cruise suitable for children? Well, simply put, it depends on the cruise ship you pick, and it also depends on your kids. Large international ships often have kids clubs, pools, and family-friendly entertainment, so children are well catered for on the ships at least. Smaller, more traditional cruise ships, and the ships of the Norwegian Coastal Express, well, they are a completely different story. Facilities for children on these ships are very limited, but adventurous families sometimes love the authenticity. Really, it depends on your children and what they find entertaining. How expensive is Norway? Well, Norway does have a reputation for high prices, and yes, you are probably going to be paying more for pretty much anything you buy once you step off the ship. A coffee and cake can easily set you back £10, £12 or more, and excursions are rarely cheap. The trick is to plan ahead. Research free or low-cost activities in every port of call, whether they're a city or a tiny fjord village. And remember, just walking around some of these fjords destinations can be a highlight in themselves. There's nearly always a hiking trail to a viewpoint, for example, or a swimming spot. Public transport is reliable, and in cities like Oslo or Bergen, you can see a lot without spending a fortune. And remember, Norway doesn't use the euro, it's the Norwegian kroner. But you probably won't need to bring any cash with you. Cards and mobile payments are accepted essentially everywhere, even for small purchases. I live in Norway and I haven't carried cash on me for years. When is the best time to go on a Norway cruise? Well, June, July, and August is high season, and you can expect the best weather, but not guaranteed weather, and the biggest crowds, of course. You'll often find more than one cruise ship docked in the popular ports at that time of year. May and September are the shoulder seasons, cheaper and less crowded, full of colour, especially September going into October. And actually, in recent years, I've seen the Fjords cruises season start early in April and finish late in October. From September to March, it's the Northern Lights season. Now, February and March are terrific times to come because you get a lot of daylight and typically some nice, crisp, bright days with lots of snow on the ground. Norway can look magical at that time of year. The closer you sail to the winter solstice in mid to late December, the shorter the days are going to be, the more limited daylight you're going to have. And of course, there's also a higher chance of bad weather and rough seas. So while every season has its charm, it really depends on what you want most: sunshine, solitude, snow, or the aurora. Will I see wildlife on a Norway cruise? Now, wildlife is a big attraction in Norway, but I've met many guests, especially from the US on Norway cruises, that have been disappointed with the wildlife compared with, say, an Alaska cruise. Now, I'll be honest, wildlife is not my area of expertise, but I do know and I have seen puffins along the coastline. I've seen whales, especially in the north of Norway, and eagles around the northern coastline around the Lofoten Islands. Sightings aren't guaranteed, and they do very much depend on the time of year you visit, especially for whales. So if wildlife is important to you, I'd advise you to do some extra research before booking and perhaps book some wildlife-focused shore excursions when you're in ports. What about sustainability? Now, this is a hot topic in Norway and it has been for several years now, so it's only right to address this issue upfront in this video. Now, among locals in many ports, cruise ships are far from universally liked, both for their environmental impact and the impact of thousands of visitors on small communities. From 2032, only zero-emission ships will be allowed in the UNESCO-listed fjords, and some ports are already putting limits on visitor numbers or the types of ship permitted to dock. It's really important to understand these concerns, and as a visitor on a Norway cruise, you can make a difference by respecting local communities. Don't trespass into gardens for photos, avoid overcrowding small cafes and shops, and try to support locally owned businesses where possible. Over the coming weeks, I'm planning to make videos about each of Norway's most popular ports so that you have even more information at your fingertips to make your Norway cruise the best it can possibly be. Please do subscribe to this channel to make sure you don't miss out on any of the videos when I hit publish. Better still, why not sign up to my British Cruise Traveller newsletter, and I'll be sure to email you when those videos go live. Head on over to davidnikel.com to sign up. There's so much to see on a Norway cruise, but remember that some ports, like Oslo or Kristiansand, also show up on broader itineraries in Northern Europe. On Scandinavian and Baltic cruises, for example, Copenhagen is a real highlight. From the historic theme park Tivoli Gardens to elaborate castles, watch this video next to discover everything you should know before you go on a cruise to Denmark's capital city, Copenhagen.